Great. Okay, well, look, hello everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people to congregate. Welcome to today's webinar, which is about remote working and building resilience. And yeah, very much looking forward to talking to NASA and to taking you through a range of topics. So bear with us, everybody. We'll just allow you to congregate and we'll be with you in another 1 or 2 minutes.
The numbers are going up quite nicely. We got 20 people so far, so maybe 5 minutes.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
So I wonder if we can share the screen. Can we share those slides, team?
Of course. Okay, and Azada, you've got the screens? Yeah, thank you. Still have few people joining, so
numbers are going up. It's super.
It is indeed. I love this because you're inviting people to your home. This is really like what meetings should be all about, right?
Absolutely.
Got guests coming, so I have to be on my best behavior.
Got your best bib and tucker on, I can see.
Oh, absolutely. Look, there you
go. Good. Well, look, we've just reached the hour, and I know that more people are joining us. The numbers are going up, which is super. But let's kick off. Now, today is all about remote working, and I have the very great pleasure of being able to steer this webinar, which is about remote working and building resilience. NASA and I go way back. We've known each other for many years, and over the last few weeks, we've been talking about what it takes to build resilient working environments through this pandemic. And it was through that discussion that we decided that it would be helpful and useful to pool our thoughts and to, I suppose, offer NASA an opportunity to share with us some of the tools and the kit and the gizmos that he has come across that are supporting businesses and disabled employees to be their brilliant best selves in what is the most extraordinary of times. So let me briefly introduce myself, and then I want to set the scene for NASA. So my name's Kate Nash. I have the great pleasure of heading up Purple Space, which is the world's only network of disabled employee networks and resource group leaders. And what we choose to do is to share best practice and to enable network leaders to start to think innovatively about how they develop systems change within their employers' community. So it's a growing community. We have 110 plus organizations across many different jurisdictions, 600 members, and our estimated reach now is 440,000 disabled people across the world. So without any further ado, NASA, our very great friend, so NASA of Microlink, Chief Exec of Microlink, we have known for many years, and NASA and his own brand of leadership has been so useful, so instrumental, so powerful, I think, in helping employees to source the workplace adjustments that they might need, but also finding ways of helping companies to move through this territory elegantly and in a way that removes fear. So we're huge fans of NASA and his extraordinary team. So NASA, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? I've done a little drum roll, my friend, my Titan friend.
And thank you very much, Kate. I mean, coming from you, it's a real privilege, honor, pleasure, put it all into one. And thank you for that kind introduction. For housekeeping, obviously this webinar wouldn't be right without captioning, because we want it to be exclusively not some audience for everyone. So what we've done, we've asked a company called Verbit, who have worked with Zoom. They have an integrated platform to caption everything done on Zoom. So they are actually online. It works on two levels. There's a automatic speech recognition, which most like Teams and others do, but they have also people behind the scene correcting any mistakes. So you might see at the bottom of your screen, you will see a CC logo, which is a closed caption. If you switch on your subtitle, then you start seeing the caption. You might see a slight delay, and that's because the people behind the scene are correcting any mistakes that the computer makes while doing the automatic captioning. So hopefully you will be watching this as well as hearing it. It's also been recorded, so we will be able to provide the recording after the session. Thank you, Kate, for the introduction. Microlink was established 30 years ago, and our sole purpose was to help disabled people in education and in workplace. In the past 15 years, we've worked with many of the larger companies. Essentially, I'm sure most of them are present in today's webinar. Our work is very much to look after people with their disabilities, and regardless of what the nature of the disability is, we allow them to participate in the workforce and work on par with the peers who are not disabled. And it's really, to us, it's a simple job, because all we do is give them the tools and the support that they need because they've lost it because of their condition. So it's not rocket science. It really is very basic of giving them the right tools at the right time, making sure they know how to use it. And obviously we support the employers and the line managers to navigate through this very difficult, seemingly very difficult area. So, and we've been very successful. We've got some of our longest clients going back to 2010, and we've helped tens of thousands of people, and we do every year. So that being a background to Microlink, and we certainly are growing internationally as well. We work in US and South Africa and Middle East, but that's just a start, because disability is not just a local issue. It's not about legal issue. People are now seeing it as a way to actually improve morale, engagement, productivity. So I do have a great hope for the future. Next slide, please. As for you, Kate.
Thank you. Well, I won't say too much more. I mean, when NASA and I first spoke about doing this webinar together, we recognised, I suppose, how uniquely placed we both are. I mean, obviously, with Purple Space, interacting and talking to and working with many, many network leaders across the world, we have obviously been noticing the work that they have been doing to support their people and their businesses to navigate through the most extraordinary of times. Many of you are dialing in from different, obviously, locations. You're not working directly with your employer. You're often working from home. I heard just recently someone talk about our situations, but it's not so much that we're working from home as in sleeping at the office, which I think sums up what we're all doing, this blended work, this blended life. So Purple Space, we deliver great know-how to our leaders. And so coming back to today, NASA, and moving into, I suppose, a kind of setting the scene. We were talking quite philosophically just a couple of weeks ago about, I suppose, our shared sense of optimism. On the one hand, we do know how hard it is right now for many people to make sense of different circumstances. Many have had to learn how to work from home where they have never had to do that, although it's relatively common for disabled employees to have their own home kit and gizmos. Not all of those things interact with their employer interfaces. So, there's been quite a dramatic need to think creatively about how they're going to deliver at work. And it was through that conversation we were talking about what we hope for the future. But NASA, why don't you offer up your thoughts? You've always been superbly optimistic, but what are you seeing? What do you expect? What do you predict as we look forward?
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. I think it's fair to say we've entered a period in our history that never experienced and hopefully will never experience again. I found, again, as an employer, as a person who actually were thrown into this without much planning, it was definitely quite stressful for many of us. And the unknown, the fear of the unknown, obviously was overtaking. So I think when we went into this with expecting maybe 2-3 months hardship will come out of it, everything would be fine. But as time goes, we actually built our own resiliences, our own understanding of how to cope with things. Some found it harder, some found it easier, but I found a lot of positives. And one of the things that I always felt was disability does create resilience. And we've always said it, but this is a time to prove it. And one of the things we discovered was whilst people were anxious being away from the office and having to do their job, disabled people were often asked for to this facility, but they weren't given one, they weren't afforded one. So now that everyone was on a kind of a level playing field when it comes to working, the key was, would they get the support they need? Do they get the equipment, the IT, restrictions removed? Do they actually have that kind of a mental, emotional support that they require? And I think one of the things I took away from this, and these are might sound cliche, but it took us to be locked away to find our freedom. And it took us to be social distancing to come closer, because I've found a lot of values in my own life that I've taken for granted. In terms of working, I can guarantee you I'm 3 times more productive. I love meeting people, I love being in networking and in gatherings, but I find the actual day-to-day work of talking to the clients and the people that I used to is much more efficient to do it by video. Previously, that was almost unthinkable. So from that aspect, it's been great. And also, as I said, removing some of the IT restrictions actually meant a lot of the disabled people who prefer to work from home, now they can prove themselves. They would be able to say, well, you know what, you want to do the job, I can do it. Do I need to be dressed up to come to work? And I can see a future where we need hundreds of thousands of cybersecurity people. And I know a cohort who could actually do that job with their eyes shut, because they are the kind of geeks that we're looking for, but they also have difficulty coming to work and meeting people. Now we have the platform and the opportunity to let them show themselves. Having said that, most employees just jumped into this without knowing what to do. So that's told everyone, take your laptop, go home, business as usual from tomorrow.
Nasa, just pausing there. I mean, we've seen through the Purple Space membership and the other stakeholders that we work closely with, like Business Disability Forum, there's a lot of creative employers who genuinely want to, if it's not just rip up the rule book, certainly bend it a little and genuinely want to do what is right and proper, and to support people to get the adjustments that they might need quickly, even though it has been somewhat dramatically. Would you agree with that? Have you seen that too?
Well, that was where my first initial impression out of the confusion, people didn't really get that. But as time went on and realized this is not that simple, this is not a short-term stay away for 3 days. And people started feeling the strains, they started feeling the kind of fatigues that we often encounter, spending long hours sitting in a corner. And whilst they were finding their feet, they also discovered there are things that they need for their comfort. And, if you look at a work environment with a laptop, it's very uncomfortable. Small screen, small keyboard, and in a tight corner. So most employees realized, okay, well, this is not working. So they told their staff, go and buy what you need. Some said, what do you need? I'll get it to you. Some said, go and buy it and bill us. And some came to us and said, will you provide this equipment to them? So yeah, as time has gone on, we get more and more. And in fact, some people say, look, I can't work without my chair at home. I've got an ergonomic chair, I need it. And the employee said, okay, well, give us the details. We'll drop it off outside your house. That's happening as well. So yeah, it was an immediate drop in the activity, then it's picking up. And the more we go, the more people find what they need, they go and ask. And some employees have been proactively asking, what is it you need? We'll make sure you get it. So yeah, I think from that aspect, it's now becoming a bit more longer term. And what else do you need? Let's talk about that. Hence, I think we're moving in the right direction. And
Brilliant.
of course, this is going to be long term. So nobody is expecting this will end in a few weeks' time, which means it's a longer term planning of, okay, is that still the optimum level of support they need?
Yeah.
I think some employers are still maybe in the thinking mode. What do I need to do for longer term? And that hasn't yet surfaced. And one or two have, but others haven't, still in the kind of a process of evaluating how do they support their staff longer term.
Of course. Well, let's come back to that and sort of scenario scan what we might see in the future, and instead start to deep dive on some of the technology and the interventions that you have noticed and are recommending and seeing that are really helpful. Do you want to take us through some of those things? And we're going to look at some of the sort of the physical things that are available, some of the things that are supporting people with mental ill health, those tools that support productivity. So in any order you like, Nasser.
Of course. But indeed, two things that we need to really make sure. Protecting, it's a world where almost everyone has become disabled. Environments is not what you're familiar with. And if you can't do what you want to do the way you used to, then you're disabled, really. That's what the term disability is. It's not the condition, it's how it impacts your day-to-day function. So if I were to look at working from home for anyone, there are two things we need to manage. Three things: physical health, mental health, and also productivity tools. The physical health is very important. Working long hours behind computers, doesn't matter how, in the kitchen table, or using a kitchen chair or in a corner, or even some people would say ironing board as a height adjustable desk. It's okay short term, but you can't do that for too many times. And setting a kind of physical space where you can consider work is good for your mental health and your emotions, because you want separation. You don't want to be working 24/7. You don't want to have it on culture throughout the day. So it's important for anyone, which I'm sure most people have discovered over the past few weeks. Let's have one part of the house my work area, and then this is my schedule. I'm going to work from A to B, from 9 to 5, or I do childcare. I do a bit extended during the day. But that's actually what people find their own ways of coping. But we have a lot of coaches that can actually help managers as well as the employees to try to get the balance right. And it's not an easy thing. Everyone is different. So we find, even in our own team, some people find working from home very uncomfortable. It's very claustrophobic. They want to come to office. If it's not an option, then how do we actually help them through that difficulty? So,
I'm going to jump in if I may. You touch on some really interesting issues. Do you find, and are you picking up that people are either tempted or feel it necessary to work longer hours and or finding it hard to switch off, because we're living in this very blended, and there are some of us who are very practiced at working from home, and it's a forever challenge in terms of having clear timelines. But are you seeing some of that? Is that hard to manage?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, as I said, people, it's difficult for people to prove they're doing the right thing. They especially if you have disabilities as well, because, you say, here's my chance, but I need to show my manager I'm working. I'm not sat here doing nothing. And you often find people go over the top, try to, email you middle of the night and saying, well, I'm working, just, hello. And that's not healthy. You really need to have those boundaries. And even, because there is I can't see any new way of working in terms of managing the productivity and monitoring your workforce, you got to really start building trust. You've got to actually telling your people, it's fine, it's okay. We don't expect the same output from you. Maybe it'd be nice if you could, and you could do better, but we know your challenges about managing to juggle family life, children, homeschooling, you name it. On top of that, your anxiety. So I think this is a conversation that needs to come up and needs to be managed by the employers. And also, what I also find that if you actually have this culture of I can work until middle of the night, it's a policy issue. Would you want to have delayed emails going out? The psychologists that we work with, like Nancy Doyle, she's a great an expert on these matters. She said, well, I mean, some employers, you really have to restrict employees to respond to emails past a certain hour. Oh, at least it doesn't get out so that they don't get an immediate response from the other person and carry on ping-ponging all night. So yeah, that's something that employees have to start doing. And if they have a policy, they need to enforce. And I think then the second part is that physical space. And I showed the range of products that everyone needs. You need a monitor because you don't want to strain your eyes for too long. You need a proper seat, whether if you don't have one, you need to put some basic ergonomic sort of common sense approach like lumbar support, using towels rolled up behind you, and make sure that you don't have a cluttered table to work with, clear all that will actually long-term will help you not to get yourself hurt, injured long-term. Musculoskeletal is the biggest cause of absenteeism, even at best of times. This will actually add to that. Add the two together, mental health, anxieties, and the physical strain actually could be a damage that it will take a long time to undo. So I would urge anyone who hasn't done it already to go back and make sure that they carried out the DSE, the standard DSE, standard health and safety. That's an important issue. People are now sitting in their bedroom working long hours. It requires a health and safety, it's no different than working environment. They're not working, for pleasure. So I think most employees...
I'm jumping in here, Nasser. So what I'm hearing from you is the need to think about these things quite carefully and almost treat it as a project. Because, although we know lots of disabled people are not necessarily susceptible to COVID or indeed are specifically shielded, although a lot are choosing deliberately to self-isolate, we as a people, I suppose, as global citizens need to predict that there will be, a staged approach to the relaxing of the lockdown. And that through that process, it's likely to be the case that that they will have to work at home for a very long time yet. So seeing this almost as a project, as a long term, and thinking about the types of level of comfort that you might need. I'm just going to remind our guests, Nasser, so we've got a chat box, everybody. So we really want to hear your questions and your ideas. They don't have to be questions. They could just be comments, or they could be things that you're actually doing, things that you're finding helpful to you, things that you're learning, things that your employers are encouraging you to do. So if you want to jump in, then do please feel free to give a little bit of text in the chat box, and I will keep an eye on that. So back to you, Nasser. Forgive me.
Thank you. No, absolutely. You were spot on about this long-term aspect. Some of the clients we speak to, they say, regardless of when this ends, we are going to have a significant number of our workforce working from home. So it comes back to this issue. Absolutely, it's a project. It's a new environment they're going to work from. Maybe it was on the planning for years to do it, but now this was accelerated due to the circumstances. Now they're on that journey. They need to now look further. One of the things that I've actually reminded our clients is that just because people working from home, the disability hasn't disappeared. If anything, maybe it needs more. So suddenly if you see about 80-90% drop in referrals, that to me, they would have to question, is that healthy? It's nice to see that nobody's asking for service because they don't need it. But if they do need it, but they don't know how to get it, or they're not actually clear whether the policy extends to their working at home, that could actually be a long-term damage you want to avoid. So I would go back to this great community who are basically trying to do everything for the disabled colleagues. They need to start examining the data much closer. We certainly provide a lot of granular information to our clients about the kind of profile of what type of people coming through, the volume, and the kind of time it takes to fix. And if the number is falling well below your normal average, then after 3 months of this lockdown, then you should really start examining what should we be doing more. What is it that is not going at the information? Most of the kind of uncertainty about can we deliver things to home. Again, that's disappeared with the lockdown eased and people are now able to go out and even going back to school. Is a common sense issue. Of course, everyone has to take due care to make sure you don't put anyone at risk. But some of the disabled people may be in that situation for months and months, you know, even if vaccine comes. So I think, yes, I would say that culture needs to change and needs to be done very methodically and in a bit of project manner.
Now, so we're getting some questions in, so I'm not going to divert us too much because there are a couple of products there that I'd like you to talk us through. But while we have got a couple of live questions, so one question is, what webinar accessibility adjustments should I recommend to my employer? And again, one of the participants saying, what live subtitle service are you currently using, because it's really good. So there's some feedback there from Verbit. But to that question, webinar accessibility adjustments, what would you recommend, Vasa? What are you picking up?
Well, that was actually my third part of the support. That's productivity tools. Now, if you look at the way we work, and it's a restricted physical space and maybe the equipment, most of us will communicate by reading and writing and seeing. So these are the tools that we've used for disabled people for years, and it's working really well for them. When it's done at the right time, they excel, they outperform the non-disabled colleagues, and we have data to show it. So what that tool does is make a person productive. Who doesn't want to be able to type at 180 words a minute without touching a keyboard? So the voice recognition has been there. It's been there forever. I mean, if you look at Apple Siri, it's been doing it for 10, 15 years. Because it's in there, but not many people know. So Microsoft offers all that built into their platform. Windows 10 and Office 365, you can use immersive reader. You don't want to actually strain your eyes reading documents, switch it on and it can read it to you, human voice. You love it. And then if you have problem with typing, or you just really don't want to type long documents, speak it. You will find that it's nearly 100% accurate. Of course, there are third-party professional softwares with better. It gives you more control, like Dragon. So it's not because you're disabled, because you want to do your job better. So I think these tools will go equally for people who are disabled or they're not. Makes no difference. And we find...
I'm going to ask you, because not everybody will be familiar with these tools. So can you give us like just a little simple description of what Dragon is? What does it actually do?
Well, actually, what we see on your captioning, which comes back to this, is taking your voice, a computer, converting to text. That's simple. And this becomes so good, so clever. If you say things properly, enunciate it properly, and have a good microphone and a good internet, you should get near 100% accuracy without a human intervention. This is not the replacement for those great captioners, stenographers that we need them. We don't want to put them to one side, say computer can do everything. But for most meetings like today, people want to have accurate captioning because we have deaf audience as well as people who have maybe autism. You want captioning to be there, but obviously cost is important. So they have three options. The voice recognition built into equipment like the Microsoft or the Apple Mac OS and all that is good enough for most purposes. But if it's not, you want one level above that, you need to buy things like Dragon, which is the accuracy is even better, and it gives you a lot more control how you could actually transcribe what you want to say. But using the online captioning tools, there are some built-in, like Microsoft Teams, it's got that built-in automatic. You can click it on, it will come on. Some people say it's not as accurate, but then you need to start looking at professional ones, the third-party ones like Verbit. Verbit do their automatic one as well. Again, the accuracy depends on all the factors I gave, but the next one is a human captioner sitting behind. Either you can do it like AI Media, that there is a real speaker. Here's the conversation and speaks it onto Dragon, and Dragon produces a text. That takes about 10-second delay. Or you can use the Verbit model where they can see the computerized one and they can actually correct the mistakes. That brings the cost down by a factor of 40%. Okay. And obviously, it's easier for them to arrange a quicker meeting, because if you have a schedule for next 24 hours, you can do it, because the people who do this are not really that specialist, whereas the re-speakers, the ones that they use AI media, you need to be special type of a person to be able to do that, to hear and to speak at the same time. So in that, so
if I
sorry.
may, if I may, I say a lot of this takes a lot of practice, doesn't it? And it takes energy and deliberate decisions to learn how to use these tools. I'm going to read out some of the comments from because I'm getting lots of comments and chats, and I really want to include those people who are joining us. So thank you. So I'm going to just read out a few of those, Nata, if that's okay. So we have one of our participants dialing in who we know well from a professional services firm, saying, we're sharing information with our staff about best practice when working from home, including how to look after their mental health. We're giving regular options to join events and talk about this topic, which is fantastic, isn't it? So they're deliberately bringing people together, congregating them, and advising managers and people leaders to ensure that they talk more to their teams about how to work remotely, to really surface that, which is really good to see. A couple of other comments. So someone saying here, temporary adjustment solutions may be okay for 3 months or so, but in the longer term, maybe employees will need more support to ensure that they're working safely. And this particular company working with you to really support that process. So really thinking about that long term that you mentioned up front, thinking about this is the long haul. What do I need to be an efficient and productive and effective employee?
Absolutely. Don't forget, this has been the way of living for a lot of disabled people. They've had it in the past and they're quite happily doing it. And in fact, they could teach us a thing or two about how to be resilient, productive under these situations. I don't see many disabled people panicking for the extension of the lockdown. They said, oh, great, bring it on. I mean, my great friend, Michael from Microsoft, Michael Wiermisch, he keeps saying, why is this all these weirdos suddenly become home workers? Leave me alone. I used to do quite well on my own. And he's quite right. Everybody's now trying to learn what these people used to do, and they do so well. And I think, that question was quite valid. Even if you want to go working from home, long term, the strains and the stresses that this kind of a lifestyle or the working style is going to impose is different to what you had in office. So you need to be mindful of that. And we have plenty of experience from working with disabled people. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Easily done, easily implemented. And you were saying about the learning curve about these tools. They've been made incredibly easy to use nowadays. I'm sure you know how to use your Siri to do a voice dictate on your iPhone. Doesn't need anything, just press the microphone and speak away. That kind of a tool has been made available. In fact, even if you look at your iPhone, one thing most blind people rely on iPhone is that speak over, that it does give it voiceover. So it can actually even read back anything you got on your screen. It was designed for, let's say, disabled people, but a lot of people can use it when they're driving or they want to do something. In terms of other tools, because I think I don't want to just focus on, they're all productivity, they all help everyone. But we were looking at a range of tools that make you better at what you do, even once you go back to work.
Okay.
One of the greatest things that we've worked with it was really initially used for dyslexic people is like ability to read 3 to 5 times faster than your normal speed with full comprehension. Now, it might sound impossible. It might sound like a ambitious thing, but it actually has happened. So this company who developed this technique that after about 4 or 5 weeks of spending 20 minutes a day practicing with that technique, you rewire your brain. So instead of reading 1 word at a time, you can read up to 5 words at a time. You can actually do a scan read of a page in fraction of a second, and you can actually understand what it says. And also some techniques of how to read the first line of a paragraph. If you want to know what the page is all about, read the first line of a paragraph, and then you get the gist of it. These are the kind of things that we've been using. And now people, even lawyers, are practicing on it. Well, who doesn't want to have lots of efficiency in reading?
So NASA, this is Interact Streamer that you're talking about?
No, actually this one is, this is Super Reader. So if you look at the Super Reading on our document, but the ones that your Interact Streamer is similar to Verbit. except it's purely for automatic captioning. It's also very accurate, but it has the ability to also give you live multilingual translation straight away. I mean, you'd say it in English, a Spanish person can hear it and listen to it and then speak back and you can hear. So it actually is so good that we use that in a Zero project in Vienna for the UN, and it was amazing. It was people who just came, said, this is so good. And that kind of tool was because certain people, disability wanted it. Now general businesses want to use it as well. The captioning now you're seeing here, a lot of people might be at home with noisy background, they switch off the speakers. Now they can see what's going on. They don't really need to listen to us, to my voice particularly. Or can my reader, that's a clever one as well. You can actually now, if you have a page of book or email or whatever, you don't want to sit behind a computer doing it. You can actually just point it towards the page. It's a laser pointer type of thing. It just takes the whole page and reads it to your earphone. So in a second, you can have the whole thing converted. It's like a scanner, laser scanner, instantly. So that is something that people can have as a, okay, I've got a document, my eyes are tired, I want to listen to what it says. We can do that as well. So that's also used by a lot. And obviously, I've talked about Verbit and Zoom. Zoom is a great platform, but it's not really, accessibility wasn't great, but the third party is now adding accessibility. Now, this is really...
Again, just to jump in, you say third party, you mean Verbit? The one...
Verbit is a third party integrator. And because the Zoom was criticized for a lot of things, less security and others, and accessibility, they made a minimum, but obviously captioning is very important. So they didn't do their own. So now they've allowed the platform for third parties to make their own tool to work with it. So both Interact Streamer and Verbit, and there are a few others, Otti and others, they actually now put the engine within the Zoom, and it can actually give you a caption. Again, depending on the type you go for, how much it costs and how accurate it is, we always find there are lots of options, but the two that we've identified, the ones I've presented, seem to be the most reliable, dependable, and obviously in terms of cost as well. So that's something. The final one, but again, this is in no way to say it's a panacea for mental health. No one ever will claim that. We're not doctors, but there is a trend, and there's a growing use of Fitbits and wearable devices to help you navigate or to manage your own health. And one of the things that we have been experimenting for the past 18 months in our own company, we are a big R&D kind of a factory, to be honest. Anything that comes out, my poor staff, all of them have to try. This is a device similar to if you have a thermometer to measure your temperature or blood pressure or whatever. This device actually helps you to see the state of the brain waveforms and associated with your anxieties and stresses and well-being. So we've been using that along with like coaching and helping to be like more productive in what you do. And people actually see themselves improving over time. It's not any longer, I'm doing my meditation, why is it now I'm not seeing a difference? If you see it actually moving in the right direction, the needle is going towards a green area, you know that you've done the work, you've done the exercise, and it's happening, but it's gradual. And it has actually helped a lot of people to continue with whatever intervention they've got. Now, doctors, and they can go to their psychologist, they can actually have medication. That doesn't mean they should stop. But this device actually gives them something visual, that you are on the right path. Does it work for everyone? It depends what you think about these things. If you are the person who thinks self-managing your condition is a great idea, I want to lose weight by going for 10,000 walks a day, and I need to know I've done 10,000, yes, of course it works for them. But does it make them lose weight? No, but it does. It helps them on that journey. This is the same, and we're actually about to do a big experiment about productivity using this. About 25 people are going to use this to do the day job, some coaching, do the day job again. And we want to see about 20-25% improvement in their concentration level and the way they do it. I will obviously watch this space because I think I'm quite excited about this.
So there's a question come in, NASA, from one of our delegates saying that she has an inoperable brain tumour and has chronic migraines. Would this help her?
It's very difficult to say with these things with people. What we know, and we worked with the UK Migraine Society, that it's not the migraine, it's the brain wave, the brain as a kind of a machine. It's like two parts. There's a chemical brain, there's an electrical brain. Now, 10% of the brain is, if I'm talking out of terms, please tell me to shut up. But the 10% is the chemical brain. This is the one that all the hormones and all the stress hormone is released. The 90% chemical, the electrical brain, is what starts driving and pushing more of the chemicals to be released. So if you're able to control your electrical brain, then it might ease a lot of the conditions. Now, we know the brain is a very sophisticated tool, and you can rewire it also if you work. Somebody said that I can actually work with certain part of brain to try to ease the tension that causes some migraines, but we haven't done that experiment. But I know that the person who looked at it from the Migraine Society was quite impressed and said, well, I don't have the resources to do a trial on this, but I certainly want to try. But the people who invented or made this device, actually in Australia, reckon they can do a lot of good for people in that sort of a situation. As I said, I'm not going to oversell anything. I'm saying they have claimed it can be done.
Okay, I hear you. And again, just come back again, you know, happy to be part of any trials, you know, a recognition, NASA, that this would not be a panacea, that it's complex.
Of course. Yeah. I don't want to give any false promises. However, as I said, people who have stress, anxieties and depression, they're not saying that this has cured me, but the people who have used this say it has helped me to actually carry on with that, whatever exercise or whatever therapy I'm going through. And I personally have had several of my team, members of my team, who actually have said it's made a complete difference to their life, and they continue doing it. Myself, use it for that productivity element, and I mean, I have actually improved my output by, I had to do an exercise, I did it once, and then I did it with this by focusing, because it's got some brain feedback, like as soon as you're on it's something called the flow. If you're in the zone, it plays a music back, and it measures all your frequencies. And I have actually seen my output doubled. And I mean, I'm not exaggerating, because my brain is like focused, I'm actually able to continue twice as long as if I didn't. So, but as I said, this is just internal experiments, and we are working on some maybe medical trial on it. So in the next few weeks and months, we will talk to the university to do it. But at the moment, if somebody wants to try it, I'm certainly able to try to find one to let them try and see whether it helps them.
Okay, brilliant, NASA. Good. So, you know, as I'm going to open it up a few more questions. So for those of you who I suppose are reflecting on the ways in which you have worked and are working, some of the workplace adjustments that you're used to, and, you know, those things that you're choosing to experiment with, given your new circumstances, you know, if there's any hints or tips or things that you've enjoyed, then do join into the chat box. So NASA, coming back to you, you know, as you look out and you predict what we might see over the next few months. I mean, as we know, it's unlikely to be the case that disabled employees, you know, we're all different. We don't want to stereotype here, but, you know, there are some broad truths, there are some common truths that we're seeing across Purple Space. And one of those broad truths is that folk are unlikely to want to travel on public transport. So we'll be choosing to notice how that's going to impede on them getting into the office. 2, they will have to, if they do work in office settings, notice how able their employer is to ensure that there is good social distancing. And then thirdly, those individuals who are already struggling because they are more susceptible to COVID and or are choosing to self-isolate, are likely to have a conversation with their employer that will likely to land in a place where they're going to have a much longer process before they get back to work. And, you know, if a vaccine comes out, we don't know the timescales. We know, you know, a good number of amazing pharmaceutical companies who are working hard and fast to be able to deliver in the early part of next year. But, your prediction, what do you expect to see in terms of the interface between employees, their employers, and the availability of really good adjustments? What would you predict?
Well, this paradigm shift we had over the past few weeks,
Yeah.
it's here to stay. So we know that. And the other thing we know is that doing the right thing, doing the smart thing to help disabled people is not just being kind to them or trying to tick their legal box. We know from the case study we did with Lloyds Bank, it reduces absenteeism, improves productivity. So every penny spent, you get 5 penny back. I mean, every pound you spend, you get 5. And that's not just numbers made up. We worked at that against the number of people absent a year after they weren't absent and all that. We know that money can be recouped 5 times over. So is there a reason why people don't do it? Yeah, they think that the solution is too difficult. No, actually, it's not that difficult. It really is as simple as doing your banking reconciliation or doing your auditing for your clients or you're doing your legal contract. We know it's easy to do because we've been doing it, and employers now more and more come to say, well, we don't know how to do this. Can you do this? So that's number one. It's doable. No condition is that bad. But I think now that we're in this crossroad, if people now use this as an opportunity to do the right thing and also get the people productive, we're going to have a fantastic life future because everyone can contribute equally. Everyone can be valued. Everyone can actually go back and really be proud and have a purpose in life. That is really what I think should happen, and I hope it will happen because we've learned the unknown, that it's not that scary. We can cope, and actually we can do well. Obviously, my darkest side tells me some people may not have been given those opportunities or the correct support, and they would be marked against, well, you didn't really do that well. So if it comes to home working, I'm not sure whether you should be a home worker, or maybe actually the home working was a bad experiment. Just because we weren't ready, it would reflect badly on the person who didn't have a choice in the matter and wasn't really supported. So some employees might just say, no, thank you. In fact, you know what, disability may not be what I want. I don't really think it will happen. I don't want people to start marking disabled people the first to go.
Do you think,
it would be.
And do you think we've come too far in order to go backwards? I mean, we again had a couple of comments with individuals who may have, say, an invisible disability, so a disability or an impairment that for their own reasons they've chosen not to share with the business. Mm-hmm. And of course, all of these things are personal choice. We know on the one hand that in order to secure a workplace adjustment, you of course have to share that information. That's just part of the deal. But for those who may not feel able to, or in certain part of their journey that they've not yet practiced that conversation. So a couple of inputs with someone saying here, that many people with invisible disabilities that haven't previously disclosed their condition might be worried about the perception if they do take this opportunity to share that information. What would you say? How would you encourage people?
Well, amazingly, because of what happened, we are now getting the kind of support that disabled people had to declare in order to get. Now everyone gets it. If I said to my employer, give me a bigger monitor, they're not going to say why, because I needed my eyesight system. Whereas previously, if a visually impaired person asked for a different type of monitor, I had to go through a program. So I think from one side that a lot of the employers are much wiser and a lot more understanding and accommodating. And as long as they know what they need to do different for you to start doing your work better, then they would say, yeah. I would say encourage everyone to have that conversation with the line manager, saying, if I'm not performing, it's because this is what I need. Can you help me with that? And they would say, fantastic. And obviously, then the burden is on the shoulder of the person who asked for the help to prove that that was all they needed. I think people will support if they know what they have to do, and it doesn't cost arm and a leg. And that's where the adjustments have been so low in cost that I don't think people will worry about it. I think going back would be a good time.
Sorry to jump in, remind us, I know there's a variety of sources of evidence out there, but the average cost of a workplace adjustment is?
Right, if you work out the average cost of equipment, not the whole service, you're talking about 100, 200 pounds,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. If you're, it's average. It could be some £5. It'd be like no, £15 for a vertical mouse, or could be a few £100 for an ergonomic chair.
Sure.
Hopefully it's no more than 150 to, I mean, that includes software as well. So we've done that analysis over the many years, over tens of thousands of cases. But if you want it as a full service, entirely from start to finish, understanding, analyzing what they need, doing the assessment, doing all the case management, doing the product supply, average cost, what we found was about 650 to 700 pounds.
Okay.
Now, that is the price you pay for getting the person to reduce their absenteeism by 80% in a year if it's condition related.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me how many days they need to be off work in order to pay for £700. That's a kind of a, so it's not very much. And in fact, what I was saying, Microsoft and Google and Apple have built those into their platform. So some of this stuff like voice recognition and text-to-speech is already built in free of charge. You don't even need to go onto your line manager. Just go into the relevant section and activate it and start using it.
Okay. Now, so we've had lots more comments. I'm really so keen that everybody is jumping in, which is wonderful on this Friday afternoon. So another one really helpful intervention. It's like we've got a challenge here, pushback as to, you know, whether we are genuinely entering a new normal. So this delegate's saying, you know, there is a risk that this has become an emergency response, you know, and post-lockdown organisations will need to take their learnings into policy and to process and making these things sustainable and business as usual. And just to build on their comments, we were talking yesterday to a group of individuals from a disability network, an ERG, who were saying they really want to get back into the office. You know, they don't want to be the last to be thought about in terms of social distancing in their office. They genuinely want their business to take account of their needs, even if it might take them a little bit longer. Group, in this case, of some wheelchair users who need to get into a building in a different way. So, you know, this is helpful, isn't it? It's about, it may be that things have pivoted, things have changed fundamentally, and that we can use some of this helpful knowledge to make it easier for people to work flexibly and remotely. But we can't do that to the detriment of others who may prefer interaction.
Absolutely. Well, I think the can't do has left our vocabulary. People will realize that anything is possible. If you manage to get 90% of your workforce to work from home overnight, then anything else is going to be easy. So there would be post-mortem, probably after this, what went wrong, what could we have done better, what worked. And I think our responsibility, that's yourself, myself, and anybody else who is in this campaign of inclusion for disabled people, we have to keep the pressure on the employees. Say, don't forget that so-called the minority, which they are not, it's actually with adding the mental health and physical health, you're talking about 30–40% of the workforce actually is not insignificant. So you need to say, you got to do something about it. You got to make sure the barriers are no longer there. And I think hopefully with the kind of learned lessons, we'll be able to have a much better conversation. There's no longer the kind of, no, we can't do that. The IT won't let that happen, or we can't allow you to do this. You can't have a video sign person because the security won't allow the video conferencing. Now we know we can. I think we'll have a bit more in our armor to go back and ask for more. And I hope we will get it, because the arguments would have disappeared about we can't.
Really interesting, Nasa. Again, I'm going to call out some of the comments, which are wonderful. So another delegate here reminding us that sometimes working from home can impact on our motivation levels. So maybe having a visual to-do list, doing and have done list. And she's referred here to a term called Kanban, which I'm not familiar with, but talking about the agile terminology and agile working. So I imagine it's a terminology that's most associated with that. So saying perhaps there could be a kind of whiteboard in the office with this type of information, but really good call out. I think, you know, you may be working with your family, although working separately with your partner or your spouse or your loved one or your children or your parents, etc., or in my case, in splendid rigid isolation, but having that some sort of grit in the system to know where you are and what you're doing and whether you're ticking things off. I'm going to read out a couple more as we get to the end, because you might want to comment on one or two or more of those.
Yep.
Again, someone saying, you know, that they would encourage companies, employers to create health and wellbeing ambassadors to act between sort of HR, who are often the corporate resources, to build this bridge. So having these kind of ambassadors around welfare. And then another comment here saying, certainly thinking that workplace adjustments, case managers that provide evidence to formally support managers is a good idea. A couple more have chipped in, giving their own average cost of workplace adjustment, so anything from £400 up to £700, and reminders that this can include, you know, the whole full service, including the assessments, but a feeling that £700 is perfectly reasonable.
Yep,
as we know, the average adjustment for maternity leave is £8,000, so yes, entirely reasonable.
And the cost of replacing an employee is £30,000. So let's put that into perspective. If you lose people, you have to replace them, and if you replace them, £30,000 minimum. That's established.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. And then another one here: what happens if your employer knows the average of cost? This is a really great question. This is a cracking question to end our webinar. So what happens if your employer knows that the average cost for a reasonable adjustment, and yet you need a lot more? So for example, if you're using hands-free of a computer, you know, maybe you're made to feel that you're asking for a little bit too much. And of course, access to work don't always pay for the full cost of that workplace adjustment. So, you know, how would you advise individuals who may feel that they're too much of a cost? Not, you know, you've just called out the loss of a person who's up to £30,000.
Yeah, that actually, I'm really surprised if an employer doesn't see the value of giving the right tools to their employee to do better. I mean, you know, the presenteeism is more costing more than absenteeism. So what is it that I can't do my job because I can't have a voice software which costs £100, £200, but I have to struggle with my RSI, or have to struggle with typing on 2 fingers? And I think a smart employer would say that's a no-brainer. Let's do that. But they don't know. If they do know and they don't do it, then I'm afraid they need to go back to school and start learning what motivates the workforce, what are the ways of getting them to be more productive. And at the end of the day, this disability conversation is all about productivity. You know, I'm not asking, or I'm not a charitable employer. I employ more than 50% of my workforce are disabled. They're not there because I feel sorry for them, because they can do a great job for me. And because they can, I'll keep them. And I'll buy them what they need in order to do their job better. It's a good investment.
Wonderful. Well, there's lots of thanks coming through. People are enjoying listening to you, Nasser. You're triggering lots of great ideas, great input from the wonderful Jane Hatton. I'm calling you out here, Jane, forgive me. But just reminding us that one of the very simple things an employer can do is simply centralise the budget. You know, and then individual managers don't have to overly worry about their own budgets, because that notion of average is tucked within that concept, which of course Microlink and you personally, Nasser, have been a real fan and a real advocate and a real ambassador for that centralised concept.
So Kate, I did this presentation to one employer and said, if you spend £1 per person per week for an employee, similar to the like health and well-being packages, like your mental health support or occupational health. If you spend £1 per person per week, you can actually take care of the adjustments for the entire company per employee, £1 a week. It's not even a price of a coffee or anything. So I think, yeah, it is absolutely doable. The cost is a red herring. I think it's very much is a commitment by employers saying, look, we want to do everything for everyone, not just for fortunate few. But at the end of the day, if they really want to survive this crisis, they want to come out with different, stronger, they have to start looking and relying on people with a diverse way of thinking and a diverse way of coping strategies and resilience. That can only happen if you've got a mixture of everyone, including those who are disabled. That investment will pay off longer term, and you'll be the successful one, and your rivals may not exist in the next few months.
Yeah. It's great stuff. Again, lastly, as we start to close NASA, and lots and lots of questions and comments, and yeah, a real buzz here. So again, reminding us, someone that, if an adjustment is recommended in an assessment, then any employer is going to find it incredibly difficult to refute that, declining what would be seen as a reasonable spend, and certainly central approval and funding.
I would definitely say something about what's recommended. It's always good to recommend what that assessment thinks the individual wants, but it has to also match what the organization is able to do. So sometimes recommendations might be over the top. I've had many access to work recommendations where it's impractical to put in. However, talking to the employers, talking to the line managers, then you find that like a working solution. So I think there's always the element of do something practical, remove the barriers. And it does happen. We've done it for 10 years. And I know that any situation, any condition, any disability can be helped. And that's my final note.
NASA, it is so good to work with you, she says with feeling. Lots and lots and lots of requests for information. I know Anna Moody, your wonderful colleague, and all of your team will, able to give more information, all of the things that we've talked about and more. NASA does not recommend products. What he does is recommend great ideas, great concepts, new ways of working. So if there's anything here that has just sparked your imagination and you'd like more information about how to do this, how to excite your employer in terms of delivering easy, elegant, workplace adjustments, then please do so. So my last thanks, two last thanks. One is to all of you that have participated. Thank you, absolutely wonderful. I'm trying to listen and react and answer the questions. Anyway, it's great. So thank you very much for everybody who's taken part. I love your energy, and we'll make sure for those of you who have any unanswered questions that NASA and his team will come back to you. They are dreamy. From my part, great to work with you, NASA. I wish you well over this next period. And that of your team, and let's talk again shortly, and keep picking up what our members, our clients, our colleagues, our community want as they go forward. And as we finish on the hour, let's remind ourselves of this sense of optimism. Disability and ill health are some of the most challenging of human experiences, and we know again and again that although it can be incredibly hard, these are experiences that might derail us for weeks, months, years, or indeed a lifetime, but over time we do know that people often build a degree of resilience, and that resilience is coming to its fore right now. So let's hang on to that as we close today. NASA, thank you, and your team.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure, privilege to be on your show. As you know, you are the person that everyone aspires to be with. So thank you for that. And thank you to the audience. They've actually put up with nearly 1 hour of my talking. So thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. You're all our inspiration. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.